when things got really, really horrible for me in my early 20s, when I was in a dark place, I made a decision to never shut my heart. I remember, I mean, I think I was on crystal meth, but it was a real clear, I remember saying, look, girl, you can turn it off right now and be cold, and you can be a cold ice queen, and you can shut it down and never have feelings. Or you can just really be childlike all the time in that spirit way of like, I'm open. And so no, I'm not always happy. I'm not depressed, but
Is that
I
anything
have
you struggle with at all? Depression?
no, but anger. I've anger, which they say is, equal to depression.
Hello, and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine and Recovery Today Podcast, where first and foremost, we're a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself, a loved one, maybe you're actively in recovery a long, long time, or maybe just a few days, maybe you're high right now, you're going to find all kinds of information and topics related to addiction recovery and really living a happy, successful, sober life. I'm Rob Hanley, I'm the editor-in-chief, and as usual, I have another really, really, really cool guest. She's an actress, a dancer, model who's been in tons and tons and tons of movies and TV shows, including the main one that I remember her from, which was Baywatch. She's been sober now for over 10 years. She's really transparent about her own recovery and the trauma behind it. She's always doing everything she can for the recovery community, serves on several boards and foundations. And she and I met at Rock to Recovery. My guest today is Brandy Ledford. Thanks for taking a minute.
Hi. Hi.
So
Nice to see
cool.
you.
I just appreciate everything that you do for the community. We had a nice little sound clip of you on the Step and Repeat, the red carpet, as I call it.
Yeah.
And that was like the first thing that you said is anything that I can do to help out the community, I'm there. And obviously I knew who you were, but I did some research kind of in the recovery space, and like you do a lot. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. I tend to always say yes when it's recovery based. I protect my time and my energy really well. But when it comes to recovery, it's really important to me to give back and to do what I can to help. Even if it's somebody who text messages me and says, can I call you? Can I check in? I always make time. And if a charity needs something, I do everything I can to support.
What comes through,
Yeah,
what was freely given, right?
yeah, that's right. Yep.
Well, I always kind of start with a little bit of my kind of softballish kind of question, if you will, which is, I just introed you. People would know who you are, a lot of people, but don't really know the recovery story, or, tell us a little bit about kind of that journey, if you would.
It's funny because I did see the interview we did on the carpet for you, and I remember saying, um, I've been in 12-step programs for over 20 years. I think it's 25 years, but I'm only sober 10 years, a little over 10 years. And I say that in meetings, and I say that to people. It's my story. But I realize that people who are maybe not really involved in programs don't really understand what that means, And so I do talk about a time that I relapsed. It was pretty intense, but yeah, so I've actually, it's even longer than that because, and this isn't really part of my recovery story, but I was sent to um, court mandated AA when I was 16, when I had my first DUI. So drinking has been a big part of my life story forever. Um, and that was the first of two times before I was 18 that I was in trouble with the law for drinking. And,
Me
those
too. Me
yes, I mean, so many of us, yeah, right. But I didn't learn anything. I was just there I really wanted my driver's license back, and I did everything I could to get it back. And so I didn't learn anything about 12-step or recovery or alcoholism until I was in the program for the first time in my 20s. And I learned a little bit about what made me an alcoholic. And I thought that I could just go to these 12-step meetings and sort of do a couple steps and bypass the real work and bypass the spiritual aspect, because I had God. I know God. I'm a Christian, so I had God, and so my higher power was secure, and I didn't need to worry about that. I sort of just took it like I was the one in charge, and so eventually I stopped drinking and using drugs, but I definitely did not have a program of recovery, and so I was running around insane. And then eventually, years later, led to a really dark relapse. And that was 12 years, 10, I'm sorry, 11, 12 years ago.
Do you
So
feel
when I
like that's
found,
kind of like the dry drunk type of thing, that you express it in different ways, or what was your situation there?
I do call it a dry drunk. Often I will say that. Um, but what it was for me is during that time period of not having a program of recovery, but just abstaining from drugs and alcohol, I was taking, you know, I was the epitome of self-will run riot. Like I didn't use my higher power. I used work or a lot of times men, a husband or an ex-husband or boyfriends. I used people, money. I was working a lot as an actress, so I was really, really work-centered, which was great for my career, but I wasn't thinking about others. I mean, I would sign contracts to be away for 5 years and then tell my husband that I was doing that,
Oh,
just,
wow.
yeah, very self-centered, which is alcoholism, I know now. And so dry drunk, yes, and just not having an outlet to deal with um, people, places, things, romance, finance. Um, so yeah, definitely a dry drunk. But what happened, someone asked me, what is the what's the biggest mistake you made when you were stone cold sober? And I always like to say, thinking I could pick up another drink and drink like a lady. Like that was the craziest idea. And I had it when I was stone cold sober. Because when I relapsed, I'd had all this time not drinking. And so I justified why I could start drinking again and using drugs. Um, and that led to a
How
real
long had you
swift
been
comeback.
sober about then too?
About 11 years.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
like it's the just tells you that there's not a problem or anything, like the pilot light's always on, they say.
It is. It truly is. We're always vulnerable every day. That's why it's a daily program it's a daily reprieve for me. I have a real dedicated practice now, which we'll get into about my recovery.
Yeah.
But that day that I really thought, well, I'm different now. I can drink like a lady. I'll never forget that feeling that I really could just take that back now. But it was a result of not working any type of not being around other alcoholics who are in recovery, or not working this program, or not being um, dedicated to sobriety. So it's sort of a natural, you know, progression and trajectory for me that I just started using again. And and instantly it started right back where I left it off, just bad, to the point where I was feeling very hopeless and suicidal, and I had to get into some serious help or I would
How
lose.
old were you when you started I don't know, drinking or smoking weed or whatever it was? Was it your
Um,
kid, or were you a young adult, or
well, the first time I smoked pot, I was 11 years old with some friends, and and then I wasn't a pot smoker, so I didn't continue doing that throughout my
I
young
never liked
childhood.
pot. Like
No, I didn't like pot either, but I mean, I didn't go into like drugs and alcohol right away either. I was 14 when I started doing cocaine and drinking, and then
same.
by 50, yeah, really,
Yeah.
the magic age.
Yeah. It was like
Yep,
a
I remember
sophomore
it.
in high school. Yeah.
Yep, I remember at prom when I was 14, a senior took me to prom and we did coke in the limo, and I thought it was the greatest thing I've ever
I did
ever
coke in
tried
my
in my life.
I did coke in my limo on my prom too.
Is that true? Oh my God,
Of
that's
course.
amazing. I love it.
That
Um,
was back in the day that you could tell the limo driver to hit the Circle K and buy you, like, a
oh, for
bottle of
sure.
Charlie and some 612 pack, and and then
Yeah, yeah.
we probably
It
got
was,
the limo driver high too, actually. I
I'm
think.
sure he was high. I mean, this was the 80s. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then it really kicked in from there. It was real addiction for me. And I was partying on the weekends and And just, I don't even know how we were scoring all the drugs, but we always had some older guy or someone's brother who came over with the stuff, and we always partied at my house.
Was there like a separation between you and your friends, or you're thinking like, you know, I really like to party a lot and my friends might, but like, was there any kind of a thing where you were thinking like, I'm kind of different than them, or maybe it's I can drink the boys under the table or something like that?
No, whoever was the partier, I'd go to the partier. I would just gravitate to whoever. And I did it in my relapse too. I'd find the people who would co-sign my addiction, and I would gravitate towards the people who were drinking and doing drugs.
Hmm.
Yeah. The people I wanted to be like weren't drinking and doing drugs like I was, but I just stayed away from them and hung out with people. And people always just wanted to be around other people who were partying.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So when did you first think I've got a problem and I probably need some help? I mean, you're at this, you're a dancer, you're a model, you're actress. Like, are you full blown in this, or kind of in your whole work mode? Or when was it kind of the first time you're thinking maybe there's an issue here and I got to do something about it?
Well, when I was when I was in my early 20s, I had it was the biggest problem, but I didn't know it was a problem. Um, when I got pregnant and had my older son, and a friend of mine said that she needed help. And so I went along with her to some meetings and I learned a little bit about it. And then I realized, oh, I drank like these people drank. And so maybe I have a problem. Um, and so that's when I sort of was able to look at my history and go, oh yeah, this is something that might work for me. And that's when I started off that 11 years of being dry. But when I really realized I had a problem was during my relapse, when I could not control it at all. And when I used drugs and alcohol more than a higher power, and when I could not manage to go a day without drinking or using some
How long did the
substance,
relapse last?
a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the whole time, did you know, like, I'm just screwing up big time?
Nope. No, the scary thing about it is I never even figured that I was an alcoholic who's in a relapse. Never occurred to me.
What did you
I was
think?
so,
Like, I had myself labeled wrong before, or how was
no,
that?
I never considered any of it. I really just went into using, finding ways to get it, and I was hiding it. So the biggest, like, it was so much energy to hide it and not let anyone know. And so it was just this whole cyclical, how do I get it? How do I hide it? How do I take it? How do I not get caught? It was just, that was the whirlwind. It really wasn't, oh, I'm an alcoholic in a relapse, I should reach out to someone. I didn't have enough program. I didn't have enough 12 steps. I didn't have sponsors or AA friends or sober friends to reach and out for that. I didn't have any of that. And so even my last drunk, which was horrible, and I was in a real dark, sad, sick place, and I ended up in the hospital. I'd still, the next day, when people were begging me to get to rehab, did not admit I had a problem, couldn't see it. So to answer your question, when I really realized I had a problem was when I actually got to rehab, and which, by the way, I went to just so that I could get people off my back about it. And then I learned and then
That
I
happens a
really
lot.
learned.
That,
I imagine it does. I would think someone sensible enough to go, boy, I'm really an alcoholic and I can't control this drinking, might actually stop drinking or go to a meeting and share about it or call
it
someone.
happened exactly that way. I know that we're supposed to be, anonymous as much as possible, but it's my brother, so and he wouldn't care. But it was kind of funny. So he went to rehab in Malibu, and I had already been sober for like, I don't know, like 8 or 9 years or something like that. And oh man, he could party too. He was a lot of fun to party with, actually. But he, he was like forced to go to rehab, not by the law or anything like that. And I remember it was one of those telling the story, get people off his back, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll just go like for a day." It was like at Christmas, and he's like, "I was thinking I'll come back like after New Year's, like when it's convenient."
Yeah, yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, we were thinking like today." So it was this whole thing, like, "Okay, I'll
Right.
just be here for like a day, or maybe I'll stay a weekend, check the box." And happy to report he's been now sober for, I don't know, 17 years or something like
Oh, that's
that. Long
amazing.
time.
You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't happen. It does happen that a lot of people go into rehab and go into recovery and then they don't stay. I think only two of us stayed in a really big, out of
He ended
out of a
he
lot of
ended
them.
up at one time being the largest rehab owner in California. Matter of fact, he owned 13 rehabs at one time. As a matter of
Oh
fact, he's
gosh.
pretty
Look at you guys getting into the recovery space and
pretty
really
big in
making a
pretty big in the
difference.
program. It's actually what launched
I
the
love that.
magazine and the whole the whole bit.
That's
Well,
incredible.
let's talk a little bit about your about your recovery. And you mentioned God a couple times, or the spiritual side of it. So I wanted to ask, like, where did that come in? Because when I was looking you up a little bit, I saw a tweet of yours, and you were saying we share the same kind of background, because I'm also a Christian, and I, like you, that I read in the tweet, I was also raised Catholic.
Mm,
So for me, that was more about like kind of like the dogma of, like, I went to Catholic school for a few years when I was a kid, and I did all my catechism and all the kind of whatnot like that. But it was much later in life when I started to have a relationship with the Lord. And so we're not a Christian magazine, as I always kind of disclaim here, but I am a Christian. And so I really do subscribe to the fact that I think that it is a spiritual disease. In fact, I really believe that a lot of the maladies, or a lot of the problems that we have in society, I straight up believe that they are spiritual. And I don't just mean like a lack of people knowing God or being nice, but I think it's like the demonic. Honestly, I really think when people are just out of their minds crazy, that there is a demonic thing that's real. That's just my 2 cents. But how is that for you? So now I'm sharing my part.
I love that you just shared that. It opens me up so much to
Yeah,
want to share about that. And I know this is a
bring it.
polarizing
Come on,
topic,
it's
but I
bring
sure would love to know what the tweet was that I tweeted that got you.
I Googled like a Brandy Ledford Christian or something like that. It was like the number one thing, and it popped up, and it said something like, I was raised Catholic, but I'm a Christian. And it was interesting. So I'm
Oh,
not
I wasn't raised Catholic, but you were talking about raised. I was
something about
something
Catholic.
I tweeted about being, yeah. You know, um, it's interesting. I definitely feel like this particular disease is due to a spiritual malady for sure, and it requires a spiritual solution. I know that people have atheism and agnostic who have a higher power, and they use that and they stay sober and happy for a very long time. um, I have Jesus, and that's my higher power, and
Yeah.
I have God and the Holy Spirit. And I wasn't raised with any religion, but I found God when I was in my early 20s. I mean, I was blasted out on cocaine a lot in those days, and I was drinking crazy, and I was doing all kinds of crazy, like the craziest things I've ever done in my life. But it was that time I was at my grandmother's funeral in North Carolina, where my dad's side of the family is from, in this little tiny church in the Western Hills of North Carolina. And this pastor just said something that made me think, oh, I need God. And I went up for the altar call, and I found God, and I got saved, right?
Yeah.
And I just had Jesus from that minute on. But I was still using drugs and alcohol as a higher power. I was still using men and women and money and work and ego for a higher power. It wasn't until I really got into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I found my connection to the source, a loving God that I have now. So I was in church a lot, and I had a really good, deep connection with the Holy Spirit. And I was really happy to be a Christian and really powerfully connected to a source. But I have such a rich life with a higher power now um because
Feel
of
like the
this
Holy Spirit
12 step.
talking to you throughout the day, telling you what avocado to pick, or I'm kind of joking around a little bit, but like different things.
I'll do that. I'll be like, well, which way should I go? Or but they give me great parking karma, I gotta say.
I
Whatever.
I gotta say, I always get the front row. I don't own
Yep.
people like, oh, God's not like a parking lot God. Like, you kind of,
No, he is for me. Sorry, but
I don't
this is
know.
what he is for me.
And I think that there's a healthy, I think that there's a healthy expectation to, not an arrogance, but I think there's a healthy expectation to kind of have things work out. I always tell people I'm the exception. The guy that gets led in the store after it's, after it's closed, all those kind of things.
We talk about not having expectations, but my pastor used to say expectations are the breeding grounds for miracles.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. That's the kind of God I believe in. And I'm sad for people who were raised with religions who give them such a hate-filled God and such a judgmental, scary God. And now they don't believe in God because they were raised with, the Bible is super contradictory. So there's lots of things that you can pick apart from that. But then to just not have a
I think that
God
there's
because
parts
of
of the
it.
Bible missing, by the way.
There are the Thomas, that whole
I
gospel's
think
gone.
like I've been reading like the book of Enoch, and I think that
Uh-huh.
there are pieces
Yeah.
conspiratorially
Mm-hmm.
from way, way, way back that were taken out. I honestly think that we are really, really powerful creatures, like created in God's image. I think that we can do all kinds of amazing things. I just don't think that we kind of know how. Or I think that we self-limit is a lot of what I believe.
Well, for sure. And, unfortunately, what I feel about Christians today is the way that they are ruining the image of Christ and who he was as a loving, non-judgmental, good
I read that
Samaritan.
tweet. I read that tweet.
Yeah, well, I mean that. I mean that with my whole heart. I get angry
Yeah.
about it when I hear Christians, and because people look down on Christians and because Christians aren't acting Christ-like. Not
Yeah.
that I'm
Well, the first thing
let me
I
let me
have
let me
to
let me say
say,
something. I am not a saint and I don't act Christ-like all the
you
time.
just took the word
Hardly
out.
ever.
Yeah, you took it out of mine. I take it.
Okay.
I was going to do the exact same disclaimer. Like, I'm really, really messed up,
Yeah.
and I'm like so far from the magazine gives me a lot of margin to tell people I'm crazy, so I can get away with saying crazy things sometimes. Because hey, I publish a mental health magazine, but same thing. Like, and if it wasn't for grace, like I'm completely, totally screwed. But
I
um,
love that. So
yeah.
true. So
Anyhow.
good.
So tell me more about like, and by the way, obviously I think we're on the same page here. Like, I don't really, from the magazine perspective, I don't care what it is that you are. Like I said, we're not a Christian magazine. I knew that was kind of something that was very important to you and central, the core kind of piece. So I have to kind of go there as well. But like, I don't, you can be whatever you are. I always think it's kind of, the only thing I really don't, well, I always joke around a little bit. I say, unless you worship like Lucifer or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah.
cool with you. So tell me a little bit more about like what you do, what your recovery process is, and like what's kept you sober, these times, because going 11 years and then relapsing, like what's different?
Oh my God. Well, so I just want to thank you for sharing all that and letting it be accessible for me to share about because I don't get to share about that part of my life hardly
Good.
ever. And I just felt great. So I now have a daily practice and I learned it in rehab and I found what works for me. And I've just kind of religiously stuck to it every morning. And that's a daily prayer and meditation practice. And my prayers are reading prayers. And I learned about contemplative meditation from Father Richard Rohr, who does a centering prayer. It's called centering prayer, but it's the meditation. And so I'll read my Bible first thing in the morning, a scripture of the day. They make it so easy now on apps. Like I just have so many apps and I have a
You have like the
routine and
U
then
version or something
I
like
have U version and then I download a reading plan, a devotional. And right now I'm on one. I don't usually do a yearly one. I usually do a weekly or a monthly, but I'm on a 365-day Joel Osteen kick, also polarizing, but man, he's got some really positive
he's a really
influence.
great like
I
motivational
think he's a
speaker.
great, yeah, motivates
There's a
me.
lot
I
of
gotta
things I
say.
like that he says, and then it's just I don't know. You're right, polarizing. So we'll probably leave it there.
Well, I will say this though, as with everything, right? Big book, Bible, New York Times, I don't care what you're talking about. You can just take what works for you and then leave the rest.
Yeah,
It doesn't actually have to be a conversation. You
yeah.
just so for me, I find what works for me, and I like Joyce Meyer. I like a bunch. There's so many people.
I love
There's
Joy.
so many people I love to read, but I have so much that I just do a little bit every day. So then I get into the big book and I read page 86 and 88. I read Emmett Fox every day, A Day at a Time by Hazelden, and I read Courage to Change.
Wow.
Um,
Like you're
so these
reading
are just
like a good solid hour block then in the morning.
every morning. It's part of my meditation.
Is an hour to, is that about the right amount, or is it
It's
less?
not enough. Hour's not really enough, but if I only have an hour, I will like
You
I
know what?
don't read.
I get on my freaking phone and I'm thinking I'm not going to be on my phone today. I'm not going to be on my phone today. And I get
Mhm.
coffee and then I'll see like there's a drop down or something. And then, God,
Here's
man.
what I do. Here's what I do. I don't have notifications for any apps. I don't have mail. I have text, but I put it on do not disturb. And I have a rule. And I stick to this rule religiously. I don't go on Twitter or Insta. I do sometimes go on Twitter, but I don't go on Instagram, and I won't go on any social or news before I've read my Bible. That's the number
Wow,
one rule.
that's a good
And
one.
before I pray first before I get out of bed. Often hit my knees, but I don't always. And but like that's my steadfast rule. I like news and I love Twitter, so but I will not go on Instagram before I'm done with my entire meditation. So as long as I've done that, and I try not to do Wordle before. I love Wordle, so I get into that. But I'm just saying, like, I pretty much have, and it's quick. It's these readings are a page, and then, thought for the day and daily reflection. So after I've read those, I read the day of the centering prayer, the contemplative practice. There's an app that gives you, it's called liturgical or Lectio Divino, which is you read a little and then you meditate with a mantra. It's not a
Okay.
mantra, it's a sacred word. So you pick a sacred word. So Jesus or God or open or Abba or whatever, you just
Right.
peace, love, joy. And then you set a timer and it can be 3 minutes or 21 minutes. It doesn't matter. For me, I like to do 21 minutes. So, and then I meditate in silence with a word, a sacred word to bring me back when my thoughts start drifting about what wordle word I want to use or what I'm doing for the day, distractions. Once I'm done meditating, then I'm done. And then I'm on Instagram right now. But that's my routine. If I'm going through a tough time, I have a sober sponsor. I'm in 2 12-step programs and I have a sponsor in each. I keep in touch with my recovery manager from rehab. I have sober sisters, so I pick up the phone. Um, and at night, I do a 10-step, 11-step review, an evening review. Where was I resentful, angry, dishonest, afraid? What could I have done better? What am I grateful for? And I try to do gratitude lists. It takes a lot to keep this girl sober, but that's all just a joy for me. In fact, I wake up before everyone else in the house because I need that time for myself.
Yeah.
I need my Bible and coffee.
I used to stay up real late and now I get up really early.
No,
And
my favorite time of day is 4:30 in the morning. I mean, if I get, and I do it by myself. I mean, I don't set an alarm. I just wake up. And I'm like annoyed if I wake up at 6:30 because then my son's get up and I got to take him to school and my husband and everybody. Like I like to wake up early before everybody. And there's an owl outside my window and it's a beautiful view and I just do my stuff.
nice.
And so that's what I do. And I go to meetings. Obviously, I go to 12-step meetings every day or every other day or as much as I can.
As much as I say, like, I kind of disclaim and I go, not a Christian magazine. I never shy away from it, like to talk about it, or the spiritual side whenever I can. But, Recovery Today started out as the whole body of it, almost in its entirety, was all 12 step. And now we've got a lot of stuff in here that's just non 12 step. And so the disclaimer that I always have for that is I don't really care how you get sober.
Yeah.
As long as you do. There's been people that we featured that have been sober 10 years or something like that. Had a spirit. One I could think of actually was like I heard God audibly, and then everything went away after that. It's kind of interesting. I've been sober for like 12 years, and then some different features of non kind of 12 step. But one of the things I was going to ask about as we were talking, and I said in the beginning, was like the pilot light's always on. And so you're talking about being connected. And one of my favorite interviews was a guy, his name was Johan Hari. He does these TED Talks with a trillion views on them and stuff like that. And he was saying, the thing that whether it be depression or even addiction, is connection and purpose. And so the thing that I get a lot, that I understand a lot from like the 12 step, is there's a full-blown community of people that support each other. It's hard to match any kind of support. So, I mean, do you think that those maybe, and I don't know, everybody's recovery journey is different, but like, what are your thoughts on, like, I guess if you're non-12 step or you saw a therapist, what do you just call your therapist? Like, what are your thoughts on kind of on that, like outside of a 12 step, I would say?
I mean, I hear success stories of people getting sober and staying sober and working a different method of recovery and not being in 12-step programs.
Yeah,
And like you said, whatever works, but like I experienced, you can stop drinking for years and
yeah,
not be sober.
yeah.
And so as long as well, and I also was in therapy, but I wasn't talking about, like, I had family stuff I was dealing with in therapy during that time. Um,
Is that your belief? Do you think that everybody comes from like trauma too? That there's some kind of underlying trauma that you got to deal with?
I wouldn't say that I think everybody does, but I think there's something in everybody's childhood that could be examined, and you can always improve.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question, just because you're a Christian in recovery. Do
Sure.
you ever feel like you can't say that Jesus Christ is your higher power in recovery rooms, or in, like, because
No,
everybody has a doorknob or an ocean, or a higher power they think is the AA rooms, but I never hear anybody saying that
I try to be the
Christ is
most,
their higher power.
I try to be the most, I try to be the most diplomatic and in terms of open. I mean, I try to live my life in one kind of even keel, but for the magazine, I want to make sure I don't want to offend anybody, in general. But at the same time, I'm also unfiltered too, and I try to live my life as truthfully and authentically. If I say something that I, a lot of times there's things that I said before that I don't agree with myself anymore. And so, like I said, I get a lot of margin out of the fact that, like, I work like in mental health. I'm kind of crazy. I take
Right.
advantage of that. I like that grace, kind of, if you will.
Hmm.
So no, I don't shy away from that in the least. I think that I think I don't shy away from that in the least, actually. No, not at all.
Nice.
So yeah, my biggest, probably one of my biggest things is, like, tell the truth. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the whole enchilada. If anything, I overshare. It's part of my like my ADD. I just tend to say things and then I think, shit, why did I shouldn't have said that. It was too much.
We all do that. Yeah. We were talking, and I'm in a 12-step study, and we're doing the promises of, we're on the fifth step promises. And one of the questions we created was, what is the difference between a spiritual belief and a spiritual experience? And um, I sort of, I answered it, and I truly believe it, that the spiritual experience happened for me right when I got out of rehab, where I was on this pink cloud of, now I get it. Now I see what was going on my whole life, and why, now I have this answer, this identifying principle of what was happening in my life that made me that way. And now I have a solution, and I'm just kind of skyrocketed, and I have all these, I have a program of recovery, and I was really happy the obsession to drink had been lifted. And it was this spiritual experience that I felt with God and community, like you say, which is huge in AA. I wish everybody had a 12-step program. We have so much support. And and then life happened, and things happened that made life less of a spiritual experience, but still great, some hard. And and it was that I still had a spiritual belief in a higher power, and I maintained that throughout. I haven't had that pink cloud again in 10 and a half years since I got sober, but I've had many moments of grace, like you say, and many moments that remind me that as long as I'm living this way, connecting this way to a higher power, I can live this way with grace and sobriety. So I
I
like
like
to make, it's like the sign of a cross. So I like to live vertically so I can live horizontally.
I
Have
like that.
faith to live. Yeah.
I,
And
I guess we'll stay in the spiritual too, because I have a spiritual one for you. Is so I was thinking about, like, COVID, and like how much the world has changed since then,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's freaking upside down. And I wonder, like, what are your thoughts? Do you think that we're like at the end like literally like I don't know, like
Like
tribulation.
apocalypse?
Yeah, like tribulation and the whole, I've got some friends that I have, they believe like, oh yeah, like it's gonna be, dude, it's gonna be, everybody's gonna be hungry, it's concentration camps, it's all this kind of stuff like that. And then I have other friends that believe like, oh no, like it's gonna be like, all this glory and all this kind of stuff like that. And for me, I gotta just kind of step. I don't know. I'm like, I'm good. I'll figure it out. But I don't. I just wonder what your thoughts. Do you think that that's a pretty central theme, like in the Bible? I would say is like tribulation and stuff like that. All the revelation, scary stuff. Is that in our lifetime? Do you think, or is it generations? Or what are your thoughts?
I know it says in the Bible that we don't know and we're not gonna know.
Yeah, but
Um,
the winter's
but
coming,
I know yeah, well, I know, this earthquake in Turkey the other day
yeah.
made me wonder, it makes me wonder a lot. COVID made me wonder if this was what was happening. It's a real interesting take on powerlessness, isn't it? Because maybe, and I feel and I believe that if it is, thank God I have Jesus. I wish everybody I knew had Jesus, because the end times seem like that's the time
It'd
to
be
really
scary,
lean on God.
man. Yeah, it'd be
It's
scary.
terrifying,
Yeah.
but do I have faith that if it is that um, we're going to get through it together? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. COVID has brought up a lot of fears and a lot of unanswerable questions like that.
Because it
It
was one of
definitely
those things
seems.
that you would say, like, whoever, I remember telling my wife when it was first happening, I go, what are they going to shut down Disneyland? I mean, I was thinking about
I
like big
know.
things that like could never shut down. That's just too much money. I was like, what they can't like shut down Disneyland, you
Can I
know?
tell you, when they did shut down Disneyland is when I actually got terrified. I mean, I was scared and anxious through the whole thing, but when that actually happened, because Disneyland never closes, I was just like,
Right.
oh, oh, this is the end of the world. But there are a lot of things about it being the end times that like you said, how things are pretty demonic right now in a lot of ways, and a lot of people's lack of faith and just lost faith is really contributing to some breakdown of our society and the moral breakdown um, of our culture. And it's really, really, really sad to me. So whether or not it's the apocalypse, I feel like it's the end of um, a time that we can value. And I don't know how it's going to look going forward, but I know that we can be sober through it regardless.
What would you, if you could go back like in time and talk to your younger self or something like that, and give yourself advice, like what kind of things do you think you might say? I mean, not like the number one thing, but like just in general, because you're pretty wild. I mean, we're all pretty wild, but like you're like famous wild. Like you're an actress, and like, part of the stuff I was read is like, I went everywhere, I could just do whatever I want type of stuff. Like you impressed me as a younger version. I mean, now you're all like, you're all mellow and stuff, but like as a younger version, it was like, you know,
I was so wild. I was
it seemed like
so,
that. Like it was like you just didn't really care. Like no problem.
I don't know if I didn't care, but I didn't think about the consequences. I just lived my life. I'm a free spirit and I just went for whatever felt great at the time. But what I would tell my younger self is just to really, truly respect myself and honor myself, and spend a lot more time reaching for my dreams instead of trying to fill a void that was left with people and other people's approval and attention.
Like
I
it.
might tell her that. Yeah.
So here's another one for you is what are some of the things that you're the most passionate about today? Like what do you really feel like your purpose is? And what are you like you think like, yeah, that's me. Like what do you feel like you were created for?
To inspire people.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing I get the most joy from, when someone tells me I've encouraged them or helped them, to be a light, to be joy. even in hard times, because I'm real realistic about I'm not the happy, joyous, and free constant. I'm not the sparkle butterfly.
Are you mostly happy? Would you consider yourself
Well,
a happy
yeah.
person, like on the straight up, like you're actually like you go, no, I'm happy.
Here's how I'm going to answer that. When things got really, really horrible for me in my early 20s, when I was in a dark place, I made a decision to never shut my heart. I remember, I mean, I think I was on crystal meth, but it was a real clear, I remember saying, look, girl, you can turn it off right now and be cold, and you can be a cold ice queen, and you can shut it down and never have feelings. Or you can just really be childlike all the time in that in that spirit way of like, I'm open. And so no, I'm not always happy. I'm not depressed, but
Is that
I
anything
have
you struggle with at all? Depression?
no, but anger. I've anger, which they say is, equal to depression.
Depression, they say, is anger inward.
Anger inward. Well, I don't have
I,
that. I make
no,
sure
I
I get
know
it
about
out.
that one a
Yeah,
lot.
I get it
Yeah.
out. But no, but I do have sad days, and people used to call me the saddest girl in the world. So I'm not always happy, but I always have faith, and I always know that I can believe in myself. And so something about that propels me to reach for joy and to know that it will pass. So it's hard to say, am I always happy? No. But am I
Wow.
always faithful and hopeful? And do I always have that spark in me? Yes, I always do. Even when things are really, well, COVID about killed me. I had the most intense time with it. Like I really, really hated
Did you
that
get it a few times?
isolation. No, not when I didn't get COVID. It's that isolation triggered so much trauma in me that I didn't know if I was going to function.
I went from anger
Uh-huh.
to like depression, uh,
Hmm.
to acceptance, and then I would be fine for a little bit, and then I would
Yeah.
get pissed off again.
Yeah. Grief. It's just was grief of the loss of your
Yeah,
life
yeah,
and fear.
it was just this cycle went on and on and on. And like I
Yeah.
would think, fuck,
Yeah.
and I'd be so mad about it. And then I'm thinking, all right, like I got to listen to my own advice. Like
Hmm.
do anything that you can do
Yeah.
as quickly as you can, like the whole 5 second rule or whatever that book is, like, okay, do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
or if I can't do anything, I realize that there's nothing I can do about it. Like the only thing I would do about it is I would pray, and then I would just I try to let it go, like unattached. Like there's nothing I can do about this. I prayed about it. I'll continue to pray about it, but can't do anything. Like that's not my deal. And then I'd get pissed off again
I know.
over and over.
I know that was, gosh, what a time. I knew that I was having major anxiety around it for sure. I went to a meeting every day. I would get up at my normal 4:35 a.m. and there was a 8 a.m. meeting in New York that I would log on to on Zoom.
Log into
Um,
that's a new thing too, right?
yeah, that this whole thing is new, right? We've got this whole vernacular now and this whole system of life. But that would save my life, those meetings, and I would go every day. Actually, some days I'd go 3 meetings a day during the beginning of COVID because I was having a nervous breakdown, so much anxiety around it, and loss of freedom. And like I said, I was triggered by that isolation. I was really, really, it was tough for me, but stayed sober through it because um, I just had tools, right? I had tools and they helped me. The thing I never give up is hope.
So
I
as
just
I
don't
start to kind
give
of
up
bring
on
it in
hope.
for landing, I love that because, in fact, I will say something about hope because the very first things about what Recovery Today magazine is, and kind of when we were talking a little bit pre-roll, is I should have said, we're a magazine of hope. And it wasn't like just a little slogan that was thrown out there, like, oh, well, like what is it? Oh, that sounds nice. Like I actually really thought about what it would be, like how I would describe it. And when we started Recovery Today, I was coming out of a really hopeless time. And
Mm.
and I kept thinking, like, how do I turn this around? How do I fix this? How do I do this? How do I do that? Like, is it more discipline? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Like, what's the way? Like being lost in the forest, like what's the way out? And then I realized that the very first thing that you have to have, like I call it the primary, and it's the precursor ingredient to baking the cake, is You have to have hope that something could possibly be better if I were to just do something, like, because hopelessness is scary. And so I'm really, every single thing that we do in recovery today has to have a strong uptick of hope to it. Can't be in the magazine if it doesn't have hope at all.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. So as I bring it in for a landing, I wanted to shift gears one last time, and I kind of like a little bit of the kind of the king of the world type of stuff. Like, what in the current state of things, if you could like do something, like what are your thoughts on like the social stuff, like, places to shoot up, or like how do we like how do we begin to deal with this? Like, it's, sticking your finger in the dike. All these 100,000 people a year are dying. Like, if we're going to brainstorm this, we could do something. Like, what would you say? Like, these are some of the things that I would do. Like, how do we fix
Start
this?
small. Start small. One person at a time. Just chip away and do all the good you can for all the people you can. Show up, be the person that you want others to be, right? So we have to be the example first. You can't do it. I can throw money at anything, but if I'm not an example, I'm around people all the time. I think that's the first thing, is to be the example. I think there's incredible organizations, there's incredible charities, there's incredible opportunity to be of service, and to share our stories. I think that's what gives hope. I think that is what helps, is to share our stories and to be very open and vulnerable and honest. And 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 then it just sort of it makes others not feel alone. So whatever you can do to make people feel less alone and to give them the hope, I think that's what we do.
That's a good one. On that, I could ask you 5 other questions, but I'm probably going to need to wind it down. And I think I should probably stick to landing, because that's a pretty good one. I like that a lot. I like that a whole bunch. Thanks again for everything you do for the community. I asked you for the interview. You're just immediately like, sure, I'd be happy to. Your time is valuable, and I just wanted you to know that I appreciate it. It's been nice to get to know you
Yeah,
a
you as
little bit.
well.
And so, yeah, I really enjoyed our chat.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me to take part in this. I think it's been wonderful.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I will wrap it up and say this has been another fun, cool interview with Recovery Today magazine. Oh, where do people connect with you, by the way? I'm sorry, I didn't
Oh,
do that.
I love Instagram. I'm at Brandy Ledford.
Okay, at Brandy Ledford. Okay.
Yep. And I
Sure.
will say to anybody watching, if you are struggling with drugs or alcohol or feelings of despair, you can DM me. I love to people reach out to me a lot, and
How
I'm
cool is
available.
that?
Yeah. No, that's the thing. I mean, I don't talk to people that are not in recovery, people who are struggling with recovery. I will talk to you.
I love that. So at
Yeah.
Brandy Ledford, and this is a wrap.